leaders were scared to lead. Accountability was dropped completely, and organizations forgot about what is work about. What is the core tenet of work, which is mutually beneficial value exchange.
Hey there, folks. Welcome to today's episode of the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. Today, I am joined by Jacob Morgan, who is a best-selling author, futurist, people expert, a survivor of many bad jobs turned researcher. I'm just so excited to chat. Jacob, thanks for joining us on the Strategy and Leadership Podcast today.
Thank you for having me. Nobody's ever described me as a survivor of many bad jobs, but it's an accurate description.
Well, I think it's so interesting because, for you to be able to have the impact that you have, to be such an impactful leader of CHROs and people leaders, you need to be able to see the good and need to see the future. You also need to experience and say, hey, what is the impact on the front lines? But I mean, that's my take on it. Why don't you tell our listeners about who you are, how you got to where you are, and we'll get into some questions from there.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in this space for I guess would be going on 16 or 17 years now. Totally unintentional. I never planned to do any of the stuff that I'm doing now, but I joined the corporate world out of college. I got a dual BA in business management, economics, and psychology. And I really thought I was just going to join the corporate world and become a chief marketing officer one day at a company like an IBM or a Coca-Cola. And after I graduated college, my first job, I was doing data entry and cold calling and PowerPoint presentations, and it was just really this terrible job. And one day, the CEO made me go get him a cup of coffee, and that was one of the last full-time jobs I ever had. I actually demoted myself after that and went to go work at a clothing store. So I went to go sell men and women's clothing, like jackets. It was like a boutique clothing store in Los Angeles at the Topanga Mall. And while I was working at that clothing store, I taught myself about affiliate marketing, search engine optimization, how to build a website, and I started spending a lot of time doing these things. And that got me involved. At the time, social media wasn't a thing yet, but it kind of evolved from search engine optimization to social media marketing. And then here we are 15, 16 years later. And I've just been, I started off writing and sharing a lot about what I was seeing in the corporate world. I was interviewing business leaders and really approaching it like a researcher. And people liked my perspectives and ideas, and organizations would bring me in to give talks, to consult, and kind of evolved and grew, all because of these bad jobs and a cup of coffee.
Excellent. I love that. It's interesting to see. I mean, presumably OG internet marketing, before SEO was a thing, but now seeing you speak to on stages of thousands to have, the people that you speak to are the who's who in terms of logos, 5-time best-selling author, written for Forbes, things like that. Your new book, I'm going to make sure, 8 Laws of Employee Experience. That's my new notes in 2016, my phone. I hate it. I also thought it was interesting that you had a certification in future thinking or forecasting, and you have to clarify that one. And I was just joking to myself that hey, what's the curriculum? It's on you to figure it out. But as you talk to these people, as you go to these stages and you talk about employee experience, what are you seeing come up on the top of the desks of these people leaders? What are some of the challenges that you're seeing? And then how are you kind of bridging the gap to support them as a people leader yourself?
Well, the whole reason why I wrote the book is because I thought a lot of organizations lost their way. So I wrote a book on employee experience in 2017, and it became the best-selling employee experience book out there. But a lot has changed since 2017. And so a lot of these business leaders would ask me if I planned on writing an update, and instead I just did a whole new book. But after talking to 100 chief human resource officers, I realized a lot of them they lost their way. The pandemic was such a big inflection point that organizations tried to do anything and everything to attract anyone. And as a result, standards were lowered, leaders were scared to lead, accountability was dropped completely, and organizations forgot about what is work about. What is the core tenet of work, which is mutually beneficial value exchange. And so I wrote this book to basically tell companies it's time to return to basics. And that's what these 8 laws in the book are. It's a kind of a call, a battle cry, a challenge, if you will, to tell companies around the world, these are the 8 things that you should be focusing on if you want to create a future-ready organization, which is one where you can attract and retain talent and not just adapt to what the future brings, but actually build it and shape it. So I unpack Each of these 8 laws, I go through what they are, how to make them a reality, and I look at each one of these laws and what it's going to look like over the next 5 to 10 years. And at the end of the book, I have these 5 potential scenarios that might emerge when we just look at employee experience in general. So these 8 laws are kind of the cornerstone, the foundation of what companies need to be doing. And we can, dive into them if you want, or pick 1 or 2. It's up to you.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, I think it's so interesting because, the evolutions of the employee-employer relationship, even if you think of like the 50s and 60s where people worked there for, their entire careers in one job because they were beholden to it. Then you had a period of time where, it was economically stupid to stay in one job for multiple years. And then you have like working remotely and employers more or less doing everything to attract talent. Now in 2025, 2026, people like mandating return to work at least 3 days a week. I saw a post today, and I wonder if it was yours, but I don't think it was. It was like, what would you prefer? A $250,000 salary working in office Monday to Friday, or $120,000 salary working anywhere you want? And I thought it was just a fascinating question.
Yeah, that's been a trending question. I think somebody put that up on TikTok, and now everybody's been asking that same question. But I think it also that question misses some of the core. First of all, for me, I would no-brainer take coming into the office to make more money. I think anybody who says otherwise needs to have their head examined in some capacity. But it's not just about the salary. It's about what does the in-person job, what are those opportunities going to look like versus if you're being remote. So if you have aspirations and goals of one day being a leader, of getting coaching and mentoring from your leaders, if you want to work on executive presence, on conflict resolution, on collaboration, on communication, on all these different types of things, and if you're thinking not just short term, but you're thinking long term as far as your career trajectory, it should be a no-brainer for why you should want to be in the office, even if you're making the same salary. So the challenge is if you have an approach of, I'm just going to focus on the now. And right now, I don't want to go to the office. I'm not thinking about long-term, 5, 10 years in the future. If that's not in your mind, you're going to take the working from home component. But again, people who are thinking longer term, who have a vision for their careers, for their lives, for families potentially if they have or want them, it's a no-brainer for why you would want to be in an office surrounded by your peers and your leaders. It just makes sense, especially if you're going to be making $100,000 more. Come on.
$100,000's a lot of money. What I find interesting, so, like you and I, we're both on the West Coast. I'm in Vancouver, Canada. You're in LA, or presumably in LA today. I find interesting with the advent of the internet, and I call it advent, ChatGPT, all of those things, is as a tool, the remote work, like you could be in Bismarck, North Dakota. I think that's correct. Don't get at me, anybody. And work a job, in Canada where we have a lot of remote work, like you're actually remote, if you can get those jobs. Now, if your commute is 30, 40 minutes, that's great. We had somebody who was working for a client. He'd lived in Chicago, working in Tallahassee. That's a commute. For me, I've got 2 kids. For me to get downtown would take an hour or 70 minutes every single day. So I agree with you 100%. I think it's important for employees to consider their, what's in it for them, the long-term trajectory. And I also believe that in-person has a lot of great value to it. So let's say you are a people leader. Let's say you are trying to make sure that you as a people leader, driving forward business objectives, growth, success, revenue, what are some of those things that you can put in place to help folks understand and truly maximize the benefit of this in-office work arrangement, really get the most out of their peers, the mentorship, the opportunities that are presented to them?
Well, I think the first and most important thing is you communicate why there's value for in-person work. I think a lot of the challenges that organizations run into is they just tell employees, hey, come into the office. And employees are like, huh? Yeah, I just want you in the office. And so if you don't communicate the why, the direction, the vision, it's kind of like sell me the dream, right? Why, what's the idea? Like, and by the way, it's also important to note that the organization is under no obligation to do this. If your boss and your leader tells you to come to the office, they're not obligated to tell you why they want you to come in. They're paying you, right?
That's the job.
This is just kind of a courtesy, and I'm just giving advice for leaders if they want to create more of that team cohesion and collaboration and remove friction. But by all means, there are lots of examples of executives who are just like, come to the office, and employees are like, why? Show me the data. And the leader's like, nah, I'm not going to do that. Just come into the office or look for a new job, which is understandable, right? Totally fine.
Can I ask a quick question? Do you think the employee-employer power balance is out of whack, as in it's like too much power to the employee, or do you still think that like kind of harmony needs to be maintained, if that's even a relevant question?
No, it is. It's funny you mentioned that because I've talked about this quite a bit recently. I think during and post-pandemic, it was probably 90% in the hands of employees and 10% in the hands of organizations. I think a realistic and better balance should be 70% in the power of organizations, or even 80% for organizations, and 20 to 30% maybe for employees. And that's because if you think about it, it's the organization that is taking the risk. The organization is paying you your salary, your compensation, your benefits. They're paying for the space in which you work. They're paying for the utilities. They're paying for the cleaners who might be there. They're paying for the food that if it's in the office. They're paying for everything. They're paying for, and they're taking the risk of investing in products and services. So yes, by all means, they should have more power and more say because they are the ones that are doing the building, the creation, the investing. And now it doesn't mean that you should ignore employees. It doesn't mean that you should be a jerk. It doesn't mean that you should take credit for your employees' work or berate them or not be kind. I'm not saying that. But at the same time, you need to understand that work is about mutually beneficial value exchange. The leaders should create a condition where you can do your best work, where you can thrive, where you can feel like you can speak up, where you have learning and growth opportunities. All of that stuff is true. But should an employee have as much voice and say as the direction of the company or on policies or on guidelines or as the work that they want to do as much as the organization or the leaders? Absolutely not. That's insane. That's crazy. That's like in my house, right? You have 2 kids. I have 2 kids as well, a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old. When it comes time for dinner, if my kids say they want ice cream and cookies, is this going to be some sort of like a democratic vote in my house? Absolutely not. I'll listen to my kids and say, I'm sorry, you want what for dinner? Yeah, ice cream and cookies and gummy bears. Okay, well, that's not going to happen, but
thanks for telling me. Yeah.
I'll listen to you, sure, but at the same time, it's like, this is my house. My wife and I, we pay the bills. We take care of we decide what you're going to eat, and you're going to eat healthy food. Like it's not a fair, even split in your household. It shouldn't be the same thing inside of your organization either. But I think to create that cohesive environment, going back to your original question, I think the most important thing a leader can do is to understand the motivations of their people, right? Because you might have some employees who genuinely say, I'm good where I am. I don't have aspirations of leadership or management or growth. I prefer to work remotely. I just want to focus on my tasks and do a good job on my tasks, and therefore I'd like to be remote. And a leader can say, great, that's fine. So don't be upset if you don't get promoted. Don't be upset if you don't get the same maybe salary increases or bonuses as some of your peers who are doing equal or better quality work but are showing up. But if you're okay with that and you just want to focus on what you're doing and you still be happy here, but you never want to show up, great. But the input that you put in should match the expectations that you have. In other words, don't expect to work remotely full time and then say, hey, wait a minute. How come I'm not getting promoted to a senior manager or a director? How come, Joe Schmo got more of the bonus than I did? How come I'm not getting these cool projects? Don't be surprised. Right. But
can I ask a question about that? Just and because again, North American context, we got listeners from all over the world.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the context is the same, whether it's in Europe? So we got a lot of listeners from Germany. Shout out Germany. Do you find that the European context and the North American context is the same with these roles? And I agree that visibility has benefits, social relationship have benefits, etc. Have you seen that to be true across all of the different folks you work on?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, regardless of where you work, obviously, it doesn't matter what part of the world you're in. There's a lot of benefit to be, having presence and spending time with your leader, with your managers, with your peers is huge. But again, not everybody has that same drive and ambition and directive of what they want. And if some people are just comfortable where they are and they want to be remote, more power to you. Just understand and expect that, make sure your expectations align with that. But if you're a leader and you have some employees who are like, look, I'm willing to do whatever I need to do. I want to get promoted. I see myself being at this organization for a long time. I want to be a manager. I want to be a director. I want to be a VP. Tell me what I got to do.
Mm.
And then at that point, the leader could say, okay, fine. Well, you need to spend more time in the office. Let's spend more time one-on-one together. I want you to spend more time with so-and-so. Here may be some training programs that you can take. Let's meet for coffee once or twice a week. Here's some books and things that you could, you know what I mean? Like you get that extra, the time, the resources, and the visibility. And yeah, you're going to make more sacrifices and work harder. But, everyone can decide for themselves the path that they want to take. And there's a place for people who want to be remote and never show up to the office. And there's also a place for people who want to be in the office a lot and are willing to make the sacrifices and go above and beyond because that's the path and the trajectory they want to see for themselves.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think it's what's interesting and I really like about, again, the whole point of it wasn't pro-remote, anti-remote. It was looking at the future of work, empowering people, leaders to best support the company and the employees within it. And what I really loved about what you said, Jacob, there is it gave not a formula, but also kind of permission to people, leaders who want to nurture those high impact people. It opens up the conversation, whether you're an employee and you want to have that conversation with your boss, how can I get promoted? Or you're a CHRO or people leader and you say, hey, I want to talk to my people and say, hey, here's the clear expectations. And I think that in this evolving world of people leadership and employees, that taking the bull by the cords, leading it is going to be critical so that, again, everybody gets what they want. The employee can be successful and grow.
And I'm all in favor of workplace flexibility. So workplace flexibility, even if you're in the office. So first of all, it doesn't mean you have to be in the office 5 days a week. Maybe we're talking 3 days a week, maybe 4 days a week, whatever it is. Second of all, even if you are in the office 5 days a week, I'm not saying you need to be there 9 to 5. Maybe you're in the office a couple hours every day, but you get there a little bit later to beat traffic and you leave a little bit earlier to beat traffic and you just finish up the work that you need to do at home. I'm not talking about 9 to 5 when I say in the office. I'm a big believer in workplace flexibility. You have a doctor appointment, you should be able to go do that. If your kids have a soccer game or whatever, you should be able to go do that. So again, I believe in workplace flexibility. And so I just want to make sure that context is kind of infused in what we're talking about there.
Excellent. No, I appreciate that. Okay. So let's, as we wrap up, time flies when you're having fun. As you think of, the future, as you think of the trends that are happening, we talked about remote work. We talked about empowerment. We talked about people, being able to chart their own career paths. Cause I know that there's a lot of discussion around early stage career, late stage career folks. What's another trend that you're seeing that you encourage our listeners who want to be, great at their jobs to be aware of, to consider and to map out as they build their, 26, 27, 28 strategic plans?
Well, the one big thing that we didn't talk about is the impact that AI is having on work, right? I mean, the conversation of AI is everywhere. But I think the important thing for people to realize when it comes to AI is that it's a double-edged sword. And so on the one hand, you talk about, or a lot of people talk about the dangers, the fears of AI, right? They're scared. And again, I'm not talking about the realities here, but the fear is that there's going to be a lot of job displacement and automation and that entry-level college grads won't be able to find jobs. So there's a lot of fear on that. And, the fear is warranted because there's not a lot of clarity in the space. Leaders are not giving clear directives on any of this. So I understand why the fear exists. But we also need to remember that it is a double-edged sword. So if you think about some of the negatives, let's say you're an entry-level college graduate and you're thinking like, man, I'm not going to be able to find a job because AI is doing everything. Like, how am I going to work at a KPMG or a consulting firm when they have ChatGPT? But the flip side of that is that you can also use AI now for the first time to do what I call show and tell. And I think a big part of the future work for people who are looking for jobs or want to get promoted is going to be to show and tell. Because you also have these AI tools where you can build things to show to your current or prospective employer. So for example, if you are, if you're in marketing or if you're in sales or customer service and you have an idea for something, you no longer need to know how to code to be able to build something, to create a prototype, to create a visual, to create a plan, to create a video walkthrough of what something looks like. And so now instead of having a resume when you apply for a job, you can say, hey, I really care about this company and I'm passionate about it. And here's what I created so that you can see what I'm capable of, what I'm able to do, the impact that I might have. And that's really cool. You weren't able to ever do that before. right? I mean, if you wanted to create an app or if you wanted to, visualize something, you had to know how to code, how to develop, how to, film something, whatever. You don't have to do any of that anymore. You just need to know how to conceptualize an idea and how to type your idea into a chat prompt and make your idea come to life and show it. The other cool thing about AI is think about how you can use it to find jobs. So for example, you can go onto ChatGPT and say, hey, I'm looking for a job in HR in Los Angeles. Help me find a job. It'll go scan through the open job requirements in that particular area. You could say, find me the people on LinkedIn who are responsible for these jobs. It'll find you the people who are on LinkedIn so that you can connect with them. So you also have these tools at your disposal that you can use to find better and more effective jobs that you want. So again, there's a lot of cool stuff here. Let's say you're in one particular area and you want to transition to another. So I'm in sales. I want to move into marketing. You can use AI to say, hey, help me transition from this role to another. Create a 3-month syllabus for me. What books should I read? What videos should I watch? And it'll use publicly available free information or low-cost information and create an entire curriculum for you for how you can upskill yourself or move from one area to another. So again, double-edged sword. Yeah, on the one hand, organizations may use AI more to automate some aspects of kind of the mundane work, but you also have AI so that you can upskill yourself, be more targeted, and do more of that show and tell element for finding jobs or for getting promoted inside your company.
Interesting. I think that's going to be a fun one to track, as we had mentioned, the scenario planning of what's going to happen in the future. I use ChatGPT for things. I worry it makes me dumber, but it also makes me a lot more capable at doing things. So,
that's
are
funny.
you using
dumber and capable? That's the paradox, right?
But that's it. I'm like, oh yeah, I totally forgot, some sort of scanning element where I went here. But meanwhile, I did a month's work of work in a week. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how people use it. And, with great power comes great responsibility. So it'll be interesting to see how senior leaders, middle managers, and frontline people use tools like AI to augment their work, to create value and support themselves in career paths. And it'll be interesting for many industries. So, Jacob, where can people connect with you? Presumably LinkedIn, to learn more about your work, to follow around what you're doing, and get some additional support to support them as leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple places people can go to. So one, the URL for the book is the number 8 and then exlaws.com. So that's the number 8, exlaws.com. I'm, of course, on LinkedIn and all social media platforms. My website is thefutureorganization.com. And then my email for people is jacob@thefutureorganization.com. So people can reach out if they have questions or comments.
Excellent. Thank you, Jacob. Jacob Morgan, my guest today. Thanks for sharing your perspectives. Joining me, if you want to follow him, almost 150,000 followers on LinkedIn. So lots to share there. I appreciate you being on the show today, and thanks for sharing with our audience.
Thank you for having me.
Folks, my guest today, Jacob Morgan. Be sure to connect with him online. If you're looking for some more tools to support your own strategic planning journey, whether as a people leader, a strategy leader, visit smestrategy.net/foundations, and it'll give you a little bit on change management, stakeholder engagement, strategic planning, and more to help you chart the future and see how your organization plays within it. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, follow along, connect with all of our guests. It's been a pleasure, as it always is, to have you here. And until next time.